Welcome back to 20 something survival guide, the place where me and you learn to survive and thrive in our 20s and beyond. I'm Darian Alexis, and today's topic is all about wellness tips for adults. And I'm going to be so honest with this one. This is not my area of expertise at all. So I'm going to be a little sponge today, taking the notes and soaking in and internalizing all of the great tips from our guest who sleeps, eats, and breathes wellness. So I am beyond excited to have Eve joining us today. She's a certified yoga instructor, self-care and mindfulness content creator. You can find her at Simple Spirited on Insta, and she's also a fellow 20-something. She's joining us to spill the tea on all things wellness for adults. So whether you're on your hot girl walk, commuting to work, cleaning your house, or simply sitting down to tune in, I am so grateful to have you here. So to kick things off, Eve, could you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your journey into yoga and wellness?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you so much, Darian,
Of
for having me on the
course.
podcast. I'm really excited to be here. I love listening to your podcast and your content.
Oh,
So
thank you.
I'm very excited to chat about wellness in that space. So a little bit about me. I recently, as Darian stated, completed my 200-hour yoga teacher training. It was an incredible experience. Definitely broke me down and built me back up again. So I can probably elaborate a bit more on it later on. Outside of that, I am a Reiki master as well. And when it comes to the wellness and fitness space, I have kind of always dabbled in it. I've really taken a liking to self-care and really helping to focus on your mindfulness. Um, I very openly talk about mental health, and I've been in therapy pretty much bi-weekly for the past 6 years, battling a lot of major depression disorder, anxiety disorder. And so there's a lot there that I've really had to unpack and become very comfortable with my emotions, being aware of how I'm reacting and behaving, and knowing what I can control and can't control. So I found that really tapping into the mindfulness space and self-care has opened the door to allow me to do that in a very intentional and guided way.
Yeah, no, and I love that. And so you have talked about how you've kind of touched on all the different facets of wellness. So can you talk a little bit about what wellness means to you?
Definitely. I think the biggest part of wellness is finding what works for you. I know we can often go on Instagram or go on TikTok and everyone's like, follow my 10-step wellness guide, wake up at 5 a.m., like go for a 5 mile run. Like I'm elaborating, obviously, but
Yeah,
it's I feel like especially when it comes to social media, there's a lot of misrepresentation of what wellness can be, and
for
wellness is
sure.
really what you make of it. You have to find what works best for you, what works best for your body, your mind, and then work with that. And for me, wellness is all sorts of things. It can be sitting down and doing a meditation for 10 minutes, or it could be going for a run if I felt necessary. It's really being intuitive with your body, listening to what your mind and heart wants, and then taking that information and figuring out, okay, what's the best modality or the best channel to do that? So that's, to me, what I think wellness is just finding what works for you and not feeling like you have to follow a certain expectation or trend or routine that works for someone else, because it's not a one size fits all thing. And once you're able to find, for example, a form of fitness or activity that works best for you, I think you become much more passionate about it. And that's where the level of motivation and commitment then comes into play.
No, that is awesome. And I'm so glad you touched on the social aspects and the trends because I am so curious of what your opinion is on some different wellness trends. So, one of the first ones I wanted to talk about, your Apple Watch, your Aura
Mm.
Ring, your Fitbit. What's your opinion on that? Because I think there's definitely pros and cons to having different things to track the more physical side of your well being.
That is a great question. I haven't thought too much about that, but it's funny because I've looked into an Aura ring before, but then I saw the
Uh
price
huh.
tag and was like,
You're like,
no, you know
not for
what?
me.
Yeah, I was like, maybe if it ever went on sale for like 50% off. But
Hmm.
um, I think when it comes to using devices or trackers or apps and such to help you with, I'll say mostly with accountability, I think
Hmm.
that can be very helpful, but I think the part that can be kind of a dangerous boundary to tread is really, I don't want to use the word obsessing, but really
No,
focusing solely on that
definitely.
and getting really caught up in the analytics. For example, if someone's goal is to run a mile under 10 minutes and
Hmm.
they keep getting 10 minutes and 30 seconds, and mile run after run they keep hitting that mark and it's not getting below, then you start doubting yourself, then you start being overly critical and you lack that self-compassion. So I think when it comes to using apps or trackers or a Fitbit, I use a Fitbit. I think it's helpful again to kind of
Hmm.
keep track of time and things. You need to just be aware that these are supposed to be tools as a reference point, but they're not supposed, these tools aren't judging you. They're not making, their goal is not to make you feel like you need to do more. It's to make you aware and recognize what you've already accomplished.
That is such a healthy way to look at it because I have sensed myself at some as you can see it, I'm wearing an Apple Watch. And at times I think it is a great tool for me, but there have been times where I personally will use the word obsessed. I've been obsessed with the metrics. I have to close my ring, I have to
Mm,
meet my workout goals. And in different parts of our life, we're kind of shifting what we need in terms of well being and fitness because I think that what some people forget is how important rest is and
mm,
recovery. And so if you're resting and recovery, yes, you might not be closing your ring that day, but you're doing something that's great for you. So I appreciate your take on that.
yeah,
The
I love that
next,
too. That's
yeah,
like
it's
such a great point. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but
no, no,
yeah,
no, no, no. You're good.
the
You're
rest is
good.
such an important part that I think, like you said, if you are really focused on closing your ring, or I always, one of my favorite quotes is the hardest day of going back to the gym is the day after you haven't gone to the gym, because at that point you're already in that mindset like, oh, well, I already missed a day. What's the point now? But
Mm-hmm.
rest is so important to healthily recover and allow your body the time it needs to be able to get your energy back up and and absorb the nutrients and really help it just kick back into 100% state. So yeah, love
Definitely.
that.
The next trend I wanted to talk about, which I feel like you'll have some good insights into this as a yoga instructor, but it is just kind of the fitness classes versus at home workouts. I know in the
Mm.
beginning of the pandemic, like the Chloe Ting at home ab workout was a hot topic, but I was just curious what your take is on those sorts of trends.
That is a really great question, and I think it's something really important to touch upon. And there are pros and cons to at-home workouts versus in person with when it comes to apps like Peloton, Allo Moves, using YouTube. I think a really great benefit from having an at-home space and referencing these tools and resources is the accessibility component. So there are people who may not be able to get up and drive to the gym or drive somewhere else or go to a studio for a class. And having these platforms gives them that opportunity to find a comfortable space in their home, especially if maybe they don't feel as confident or maybe they're a little
Mm-hmm.
hesitant to go to a fitness class for the first time. This might give them a little bit of a cushion to help them feel a little more comfortable learning what they're about to do before maybe going to an in person class and possibly feeling a little lost if that's a concern they might have. It also really provides a different financial side to things. So, for example, a unlimited membership to a yoga class, to a yoga studio, could be anywhere from $100 to $200 a month depending where you live, and that's a pretty big cost to pay.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas a $20 down dog subscription to that app can give you tons of on hand content to reference every single day for a much cheaper or much more affordable cost. So I think those are some of the benefits. Another side, I think, is it really provides people the opportunity to take different classes and maybe figure out again what works best for them. So if someone's always wanted to try doing maybe a HIIT workout, now they can go online and find a 15-minute HIIT class if they really wanted to. The flip side to that is with the saturation, or I should say oversaturation of these classes, you have to be a little hesitant on the quality of the workout you're doing and the instructor. You don't have someone working hands-on with you, helping to guide your movements. It's kind of just like every now and then looking up at the screen and
Yeah,
hoping
that
you're
is
doing
such a
something
good
right.
point.
Yeah. So I think you're much more, it's harder. I know, especially with yoga, I do both. I have an at-home practice, but I also go to a studio. And there's so much value in going to a studio and having them call out your name and say, like, Eve, relax your shoulders, or,
Mm,
push up a little harder, add a little puff to your chest. And being able to, we can't look at ourselves in a bird's eye point of view and see what we're doing and if it's aligning. But having those alignment cues from an in-person instructor helps just add a little bit more oomph to your practice.
yeah.
Um, Whereas again, if you're at home, doing an ab circuit or something, even when it comes to modifications, maybe you don't know if you can't go fully extend your arm and you have to come down onto your forearm or have to come down all the way down. You might not be aware of what those modifications can be if the instructor that's teaching maybe hasn't been trained in that way, or
Mm.
isn't aware of what their audience is capable or has access to being able to do.
Yeah, and you brought up a really good point with people that might not be confident going into a class, that then they might like want to do the at-home workouts or trends that come out. But do you have any tips for someone like me that maybe has never gone to a Pilates class or gone to a yoga class, and tips that might make them feel more confident to actually go and try it out with an instructor to get the help that we need if we've never done the workout before?
I love that. So one of my biggest things that I actually struggle with is that I'm always that person that's like texting another friend, like, hey, will you come to this
Like, yeah.
Pilates class with me? Yeah, because
So
I get really bad
scary.
anxiety. Yeah, and it's such a valid and true thing to experience.
Mhm.
And it's completely normal. I just want to make sure people are aware it's okay to feel that way and kind of feel a little intimidated or a little uncertain because you're
Definitely.
trying something new. Um, I remember the first time I ever tried a reformer Pilates class, I was like violently shaking in the room. And then we go and lay down and we're in the reformer and I'm like, this is it. Like, this is what I was psyching myself out about. So especially if people also are battling insecurities or are having, in the past, maybe unfortunately haven't had a good experience in a class in a public setting like that before, and they
Mhm.
might be a little reluctant to come back. It can be so anxiety inducing to try something new, especially if you're on your own. Some of my tips that I've used to help me is I always put on a cute outfit. I always
Okay.
try and put, yeah, I always try and put on something that makes me feel super confident. So whether that's, if you feel like covering up or if you feel like putting on bright colors, patterns, find an outfit that really helps you feel like, I look good today.
I
And then,
like it,
yeah, yeah. And then
matching
put it on.
sets.
Yes. That is like the first thing that I do is I just
Mhm.
find something that I know makes me feel good, because if I feel good in this, then, I'll feel good wherever I go in it, hopefully.
Yeah.
Another thing is to ask questions. Don't, again, it might be a little nerve wracking, but go up to the instructor or whoever's leading the class and say, hi, I'm new here. This is my first class. What can you expect? One thing that we've learned as yoga teachers is ideally you should never really call out somebody new if they're in class. And as far as I've experienced, I've never, like I've gone to Cycle Bar and Soul Cycle
Mhm.
and what's the other place I'm forgetting in
Pure bar? Or is it a
um,
cycling place you're
no, it's
thinking
like
of?
the core class I'm forgetting
Oh,
in like downtown area. I'm
have
forgetting
not been.
my friend owns the studio, so I should remember what it's called. But anyway, I've gone to classes and never up to this point, knock on wood, has
Mhm.
anyone been like, oh, here's Eve, she's brand new. It's always just been like, hey, if there is anybody and this is your first time, like come on to the back and like let me know if you have any questions, or maybe if in advance to registering for the class, if you just note like, hey, this is my first time, they'll see
Mhm.
that and most likely either wait to see if you approach them or kind of offer an opportunity for anybody who might have questions to come address it with them privately. That's the ideal situation. So never feel discouraged or unsure if you should ask, because questions are always welcome. And then the next thing that, again, I do is look up videos. So if you've never tried a Pilates class, look online, kind of get an idea for what you're doing. I mean, hopefully going in, you might have a little bit of an idea, but if,
Yeah.
like I said, you're one of my friends that falls victim to me just like pulling them into something, either ask your friend what they're doing or look online and look at a couple of videos just so you're aware of what to expect. My mom has a lot of arthritis and bone issues. And I invited her to a yoga class once, and she was really nervous that this was going to require a lot of like intensive movements and strain.
Mm-hmm.
However, I knew going in that it was a restorative class, very slow to the ground and very slow, casual movements. But if my mom didn't have that knowledge from me and like that trust to know what she was getting into, she could have, signed up for a super intense power yoga class and then gone in and been like, this is too, this is a little
Yeah.
advanced for me. So yeah, always asking questions, ask any studio owners and just kind of do a little week research to figure out what you're doing. But,
I
and of
think
course,
those are
wear a
great
cute outfit.
tips. Yeah, wear a cute outfit. And I
Yes.
think something that has been really important for me when I've tried classes for the first time is just knowing it's okay to do modifications.
Mm,
And I think a lot of yoga instructors are really great about showing the different levels. But even if you're going to a HIIT class or Pilates class, like if you need to break the pose, that's okay.
yes.
Everyone's at different parts in their journey. So just never be too embarrassed or too afraid to
Yes.
do what feels good for your body.
Yeah, listen to your body is a huge one. If you're sitting in something and you're like, "Ow, this hurts," it's not supposed to feel like that. So, I even struggle with this. Ego can be a huge thing. You don't want to feel like, "Oh, I'm failing, I'm giving up," but it's never that. It's okay to look at something, try it and say, "Maybe this isn't for me," or "Maybe I should try something different." We all have different bodies, so, really really listen to what it's saying to you because, you could end up doing more damage in that sense than, a little damage to your ego, if you will.
Yeah.
Just the other day, I have a Peloton. I was in a 30-minute Peloton class. I'm like, oh, this looks like a really fun arms. And I got 10 minutes in and I was like, no, we're done here. I immediately clicked out of the class and it was like, why did you leave? And I'm like, it was too hard. Like I couldn't, it was too hard for me. So, listen to your body. Don't push yourself too much and take it in stride because your day one could be someone's day 100 and someone's day 100 could be your day one.
100%. I love that. Thank you for sharing. And we're speaking about listening to our bodies. So I have two more trends that I wanted to talk about. I'll just lump them together. And the one is the like hot girl walk 12-3-30 and cycle syncing. So these
Mm.
kind of apply to the women. Obviously men can 12-3-30, but I think most of our men do not have a cycle. So I was curious if you are knowledgeable at all with cycle syncing, if you've ever tried it, and if you think that it's a trend more people should try out.
I love this question because I am very open about talking about menstrual health. I think it is so important to have these conversations as women. Sometimes they can be kind of shunned a little bit or maybe a
Yeah.
little awkward to talk about. I have looked at cycle syncing. I've tried it.
Mm-hmm.
It definitely works for some people. I find that my cycles are very kind of all over the place sometimes with how I feel. Sometimes I have so much energy, sometimes I don't. And when I tried cycle syncing, it didn't feel like it was something that suited my body.
Okay.
However, I do follow cycle syncing when it comes to eating and kind of eating intuitively.
Oh.
Yeah. So being able to kind of um, figure out what foods you should be eating to kind of alleviate cramps or when you're ovulating, what are foods and liquids you should be drinking there.
Mm.
So that's something that I do follow along with. When it comes to more physical exercise, I find again, I do whatever my body is feeling and listening intuitively. So typically for me at the beginning of, when I'm on my period, I literally am a slug in bed. I don't do anything. I'll try walking because it is really good with helping with cramps and moving.
Mm-hmm.
But like, I see some people going and lifting at the gym and I'm like, I don't know where you're pulling that energy out of because for me, I could just lay on the floor and stay there. Um, so
That's extremely relatable for day one and day two for me.
yes, totally, totally. But I do find, as I kind of am going further into my week, I do get a little bit of an energy kick, and so I'll maybe do like a slow restorative yoga class. I try and stay away from anything a little too stressful or high energy. So, like I said, a slow restorative. But after my cycle, I feel like I could just take off and go run 10 miles. I always have, I know that's like when your testosterone kicks up. So I do a lot of lifting at the week after my cycle. I'm forgetting what it's called. Is that like I think that's the
I am not
solar phase or
knowledgeable or
something.
like, yeah, do not quote me. I'll throw it in the show notes. Whenever
Yeah,
I
I
don't
think
know
it's like
something, I throw it in
solar
the show
phase or
notes.
something. Follicular, I don't know, something like that.
Follicular sounds
Yeah,
correct,
it's
or
maybe.
lunar.
Yeah, you're lunar or I don't know, something. I don't know the words actually. I won't pretend that I know either,
Yeah,
but I
yeah.
do not know. But anyway, the week after I do a lot of lifting, running. I have a lot more energy, so I'll do that. And then, yeah, kind of as I move forward, second or third weeks, I do a little bit of Pilates. Um, and the third week, I kind of do some more like power yoga classes. But I find that during my like period, I really don't do any physical activity because my body tells me, no, we need this to rest. We're restoring, we're building up. Your body's taking all of this energy to push into, going through your, you're cleaning yourself out and everything that you shouldn't. My body tells me, you need to stay away from pouring energy into other things. Let us just handle it from here because that's still a workout for your body. It's still burning calories and
Oh
taking
yeah, I'm
energy and
feeling it.
everything. Yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, seriously. So yeah.
Thank you for sharing and being so open and vulnerable about that, because I know it is kind of like it's a hot topic, but something
Hmm.
that sometimes people don't like to talk about. And the other part of the question was talking about the hot girl walk. And
Hmm.
I am a huge fan of the hot girl walk, whether it's 12-3:30, whether it's going out and walking outside, hot boy walk. I know I got some male listeners, don't want to exclude you guys.
Yeah.
But I just think that walking is so restorative. It is
Mhm.
so healing in every sense, whether you're walking next to the beach, walking in the woods, walking with a friend, walking with your dog. And I think it's something that's great that everyone can do. And it helps you get into a really wonderful mindset. Have you tried the 12-3:30, or do you ever go on a hot girl walk yourself?
Yes, 100%. I love the hot girl walk era that we're seeing online. I think, again, it's a really fun way, I think, of also introducing people to exercise. So it's kind of
Yes,
like this little confidence boosting, like,
definitely. I wanted
hot
to add that
girl,
too.
yeah, like putting on your cute outfit, whatever
Put
you
on
feel.
your
Maybe you're putting,
headphones.
yeah, maybe you're putting on sweats, like whatever you feel, again, confident in, and just encouraging that we all are beautiful. We all look fantastic. And walking in itself is such an incredible form of exercise. I feel like a lot of people might think, exercise and movement is, again, like doing 30 deadlifts in the gym. And that's not always the case. Other forms of movement, you can walk. There's a girl I follow on Instagram. I wish I knew her name right now, but she's a long distance walker and I love her content.
That is a job you can sign me up for. Long
Yes.
distance running, not
It,
so much, but long
yeah.
distance walking, I could walk for hours and
Yes,
just
I'll see if I
brain
can send
off.
you
Yeah, please
her
do.
page because it's so funny. The first video I ever watched of her, she pops on, she's like, "You guys know you can just walk places, right?" She's like, "I'm a long distance walker. We have cars, but she's like, you can just walk."
It's
And
very
so she
European
goes,
of her.
no, really, I think she lives in Seattle, Washington, and she always just vlogs herself putting on her clothes, her little backpack, getting her little snacks ready. She puts on her headphones and she walks like 4 miles or 4 hours to her friend's house. And I'm just like, I've never thought of that. As like silly as it sounds, we can just walk everywhere. We don't need to like drive. Obviously, judging where you live and stuff like that is important.
Hmm.
Connecticut is not very walkable, but
No, but I value
so
cities that are walkable because I
mm,
feel my happiest when I'm abroad. And I think a lot of it is because I
mm,
am walking, and you get to experience things in life that you wouldn't experience if you were in your car.
yeah.
For example, today I was having a very emotional day this morning, and I was just done feeling bad for myself. So I put my headphones on and I ran. I didn't walk. I ran a 5K for the first time. I cried at the end of it.
Hey, oh
But
my gosh,
during my
amazing.
thank you. It was extremely emotional. I know it's not a big feat for a lot, but it was a big feat for me because I've never really ran more than a mile. So
That
running
is
three and a half
amazing.
miles was emotional. And even if it was a walk, I was just taking in. I'm like, whoa, I never
Mm,
noticed there's a boba place right there. I never noticed that there's a creek over here because I'm usually in my car. So just getting outside and, walking, running, whatever you're doing for your wellness, highly recommend.
yeah, and I thank you for sharing that too. I think a big point I wanted to point out from what you said is you had this emotional release, and
It
I think
was.
that's so important because again, you don't need to do these I mean, running a 5K is intense. So, I mean, I applaud you because that's incredible.
Well, but
Um,
we also know people that run 10 miles a day. So something that's incredible for
mm,
us might not be incredible for our counterpart, but that just goes into another thing. We can't compare ourselves in our wellness
yes,
journeys because we're all at different points and our success can look
yes.
different depending on who we are.
Oh, totally, definitely. And I love that. I think it's so important to show that, that was something really healing for you. And that could again be something very encouraging to someone else who says, maybe my thing is just walking, long distance walking. And if
Yeah.
that's amazing. But I love walking. I think hot girl walks, it's so important. Hot boy walks, hot anything walks,
Hot
just
grandma
going,
walks.
yes, going out. My mom, I'll share a little story. So my mom was diagnosed with osteoporosis 5 years ago. It's a degenerative bone. I'm not sure if it's like a disease. I think it's a disease. I don't recall. Don't quote me on it. But my mom was diagnosed with osteoporosis, and she kept breaking bones very often. And her doctor said, "My biggest thing for you is go walking." My mom has since then, like next day, got up, walks like 5 miles every day for the last 5 years, and she no longer has her osteoporosis. It
Wow.
is in remission.
Wow.
And all she does is walk. That's where I was with her today. I went to the mall with her and we just go walking. Like
I love
she is,
that.
yeah. So it can be so healing. And I'm like, Mom, you go do your hot girl walks. Like she doesn't care. She takes her phone. She doesn't even have headphones. She puts her phone on speaker and just like walks out, like walks in public. And I'm like, you go, because she rocks. So super important.
Thank you for sharing that story. I
Yeah.
want to switch gears here a little bit because I want to get more into your yoga practice and mindfulness. So, these are both things that can help us feel better overall, especially dealing with the craziness of being in our 20s. So, I was curious on how you cultivate mindfulness in your daily routine and how you think that yoga and mindfulness can just help us feel better.
Yeah, I love this question. I mindfulness is like my bread and butter, so I love this. My I can kind of walk you through if you like kind of what I do as like mindfulness and then how I kind of got to this point because I will say disclaimer, I'd say within the last 2 years I've really focused on mindfulness, but it was
Mhm.
something that I really struggled with growing up. Like I said, I was in therapy for 6 years. So now I'm at a point where I've healed and I'm able to kind of tap into these parts because your mindfulness journey can be very exhausting and it can be very emotional and a lot can come up during the process. So for me, like clockwork every day, the first thing I do is no phone in the morning. I am very scattered brained. I'm very anxious by nature. And I find that when the first thing in the morning I'm putting a screen in my face, I just already am setting myself off where I'm very stimulated for the rest of the day. I'm in a very privileged and lucky position where the sun rises through our window every single morning. So,
Oh, I love that.
yeah, I
I
don't
do
know if
not have that. I wake up in a dark room and I think I need to get like a light that
mm, like the ones that,
simulates sun.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I got this from Andrew Huberman. I don't know if you know of Huberman Lab podcast, but
Oh,
he's
mhm.
a board certified neurologist, and he works at the Stanford University, I believe. And he talks a lot about his mindfulness, and he actually inspired a lot of what I do. But his research showed that the first thing you should do when you wake up in the morning is either look out a window or go outside and look at the sun. Obviously, don't stare at a shining sun. When I say look at the sun, I mean like look at the brightness around it, the aura, I should say. But please, nobody go up and just like burn your pupils and stare at the sun. But just go outside and allow your irises to get fresh sunlight in because like
Mm.
it kind of helps sync to your circadian rhythm. Supposedly, that's what his research says. So every morning I get outside and I try and either look at the sun or I open the window and look at the sunrise. And it's pretty, it's very healing to just tap into that little quiet part of the day. I'm a morning person. I wake up at 6 a.m. My husband is not a morning person. So again, do what works for you. But for me, I've always just been an early riser. So waking up, trying to look at the sunrise, trying to look at natural light versus a phone has been really helpful for me. From that point on, I try not to use my phone for 1 to 2 hours. And I'll sit down and I do have a 5 minute gratitude journal. Again, this is what works for me, but I did buy the 5 minute journal. And it's really helpful and thought provoking to sit down, think about 3 things that I'm grateful for the day. I'm not kidding. Sometimes I literally put like, I'm grateful for mac and cheese. Like sometimes it's just these little things that I'm like, you know what? This makes me really happy today. And I write about it. And then you set a affirmation for yourself. Sometimes it's something that comes to me sometimes, and I do have kind of a strong faith but background, but I'll put like a Bible verse that really resonates with me. Or another aspect is I will put something like that I heard that was really encouraging, then I think
Mm.
on that. So
Also
it's
wanted to say that on Eve's Instagram, she shares some of these quotes, and I personally find them very inspiring, whether you share it in a reel or however you're sharing it. So if you're someone that wants to see a little bit more of these quotes and mindfulness things, just plug in Eve here, and I'll link her Instagram in the show notes.
Thank you. Yeah, I do a lot of my journaling or what comes up through that kind of morning. I don't like the word ritual, but like that morning quiet
Routine.
time. Yeah,
Hmm.
that morning routine
Hmm.
are these just kind of like really profound little like gems. So they
Little
come and
tidbits.
yeah, they come as fast as they leave, but sometimes I'll write them down. I try most of the time to write them down. I never used to do this, and my Instagram is still a very new thing because um, I have always been a very creative writer, and people have always told me, like, where do you pull these like analogies and this like imagery out of? I'm like, it's just there. So I was
My
like, you know what?
mind.
Yeah. I was like, you know what? Let me just try plugging it somewhere and see if it resonates. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, of
But yeah,
course.
so gratitude journaling, I'll try and do a little reading. Um, to help again with mindfulness, this might not always be helpful to others because I know how much people love their coffee, but I try not to drink coffee on an empty stomach first thing in the morning. So I love coffee, and this is hard for me, but first thing when I wake up also is I drink hot water with lemon. It's really good to
Mm-hmm.
help promote digestion and get kind of your digestion going and kickstarting your body to help eliminate any secretions or anything coming out. A lot of people kind of jump to having coffee on an empty stomach. I used to be the one to do that as well. And that can, for somebody like me who's very sensitive to caffeine, the rest of the day I'm like this and just like buzzing.
That has been
So,
me today because I did
yeah.
have coffee on an empty stomach. So
Yeah. So
I've been
I,
buzzing all day.
yeah. So just for me, because I'm anxious and stuff, it makes me feel a little more anxious and just like have this heightened awareness of things around me. So drinking lemon water is good too. But I really want to encourage for people that maybe aren't morning people, and if maybe you are a night owl, find a time in your day where you really, even if it is just 5 minutes, have allot it to quiet time. I love more than anything in the world my mornings where it's just me sitting on a chair and listening to the birds chirping and this like little quietness of the world not yet woken up. It's really healing in a way I really don't know how to describe. But that's also a thing in the evenings too. So, if you are maybe a night owl, find again that time. Maybe it's 11, maybe it's 10:30, where you can just sit and feel the world winding down. And hopefully that can also help stimulate your body to kind of prepare for rest and you wind down as well. There's a
That's
lot of talking,
awesome.
so
No, you're good. I really appreciate you sharing on the reflection and the mindfulness in your journals and the gratitude journal. Those were all points that I wanted to touch on. But one thing that you haven't quite touched on yet, which you have helped me with personally, is mindful breathing. So I was
mm,
wondering if you could walk me and the listeners through a tiny breathing exercise that can help them in their days.
yeah, absolutely. Breathing is one of my favorite things. It's again really helped me with my mental health and find clarity. really help calm my nerves. There's quite a few breathing practices that you can do. In yoga, we call it pranayama, and it's exactly that. Prana is known as your life force energy, and breathing helps stimulate and circulate that prana, that energy throughout your body. So, a few that I'm sure people might be aware of is maybe 1 to 2 breathing or box breathing. Box breathing is where you, for example, hold your inhalation for 4 seconds. You inhale for 4 seconds, hold your inhalation for 4 seconds, exhale for 4 seconds, and then hold on your exhalation for 4 seconds. And that square breathing is really helpful for calming anxiety, relaxing the body. 1 to 2 breathing is in making your exhalations longer than your inhalations. So if you're inhaling for 4 seconds, exhaling for 8. Again, having longer exhalation is better for your parasympathetic nervous system and relaxing the body. When you have a longer inhalation versus exhalation, that stimulates your fight or flight, your sympathetic nervous system. So if you're trying to go to bed or maybe relax, doing box breathing or 1 to 2 breathing is really great. Another big tip I have is when you do breathe with the whole torso. So inflating the belly like a balloon, then elevating up to the upper rib cage and then to your top chest, and then exhaling from your chest, your ribs, your belly, bringing your belly to spine. A big indicator to know where you kind of hold stress is if you find that you tend to be more of a chest breather.
Oh my gosh.
So,
I was just about to ask that because as you're
mhm,
talking, I'm like touching my stomach, touching my chest. And I think I'm a chest breather, but that isn't that deep of a breath. So a lot of times when I'm anxious and stuff, I
mhm,
feel out of breath. And
yeah,
how do I get that belly breath? Like, what do I
yeah.
do?
And I also want to say, sometimes people just naturally do breathe more with their chest, but studies have shown that breathing with the whole of your torso, like the whole part of your lungs from the lower where your belly is up to your collarbone, like that chest area, is just a
Hmm.
more efficient way of breathing. So you get a
Makes
fuller
sense.
breath by doing that. But it's okay sometimes if people just naturally like, I just breathe up here. Like, that's okay. A great way to work on this, and this is I'll say it as a trigger warning, but if sometimes a lot of people have trauma that really resonates in like the lower region of their body, a lot of them tend to kind of lock up their diaphragm, unfortunately, and it makes it very uncomfortable to belly breathe. A really helpful thing that we learned during yoga training is doing crocodile pose. So crocodile, I'll try and like show it here, is when you make a little pillow with your forearms and you rest your head on it. You're laying on your belly flat on the floor. For people that have maybe a flatter chest size, if you roll up a yoga blanket or just a little blanket and put it underneath your collarbone, that will help elevate your chest a little bit so it's not as painful. This also helps for anyone with a larger chest as well, so you're not like fully laying flat on it.
Hmm.
So you lay down, put your forehead on your forearm, and in this prone position, and just really focus on sending the breath to the sides and your back. And naturally, you'll start breathing through your belly. That's a great way of doing that a couple of times a day to really help send your prana and your breath to the muscles on the side of your ribs, your back, and really using your whole total torso. That's a really helpful posture to do.
And is breathing something that you teach or help with in your yoga practice?
Definitely, yes. So every yoga practice typically should have pranayama as a part of it because
Okay.
yoga is the syncing of mind and body. So the way we do that is through our breath. So when we're doing, extensions upward,
Hmm.
lifting, inhaling as we raise up, exhaling as we come down, we're syncing our body together to again help circulate that energy. So typically in a yoga practice in the beginning, you will spend maybe 5 minutes, depending on how long the class is, kind of sitting in a meditative position, whether that's, another major thing, meditative position does not have to be like crisscross applesauce, like Buddha style. Like it can literally be like sitting legs long back against a wall. It could be laying flat on the floor, whatever feels comfortable to you. Sitting in a position that feels comfortable and preparing your body for movement by introducing breath practice.
Awesome. Thank you. Beyond yoga, do you have any forms of exercise or movement perhaps that you would recommend to young adults to enhance their wellness or physical health or even breathing techniques?
Yeah. So I think anything, a very accessible and easy form of movement to even incorporate into your daily life is first thing when you wake up and you sit up in bed, just little wrist twirls, wiggle the toes, like do a little gentle rolls of your head back and forth on your neck, just introducing these little micro movements like wiggling the fingers, jazz hands, like all of that stuff really helps just wake up the body. And they seem so subtle, but you really do notice a difference long term. Your wrist flexibility will improve. I feel like our toes are the most ignored part of our body, and it
I
drives
can't
me
even move all
crazy.
my toes individually
I
now that
I
I'm thinking of
shamelessly
it.
cannot either. But your toes are doing so much work. Your feet are keeping you upright. If you are somebody able to walk, they are keeping you upright all day. So they deserve love too. So doing a little toga, like bend your toes, flex them, rolling out your ankles, just thanking your body for what it's able to do for you. And even I know I've dabbled a little bit in Ayurvedic medicine, and Ayurveda does a lot with oils. So, taking a little bit of
Mm.
oil, sesame oil, and like anointing yourself, like putting it on your joints and like giving yourself little massages on your scalp and stuff. These are little tiny bits of movement or exercise that can really help just lubricate the joints and help with mobility.
No, I love that 100% because something that I have found with working out too is just the power of low impact movement. Before, I thought wellness was bench pressing
Mm-hmm.
200 pounds and running a 10K and having to just push myself to pain every time. But now I feel like wellness is more listening to my body and doing these low impact things that can slowly help me become a better person and help me find peace within. So, thank
Yeah,
you for sharing
definitely.
those techniques.
Yeah, definitely. And I think just to add a little bit, like there's nothing wrong if somebody is like a huge gym goer and loves to go and like deadlift and bench
Mhm.
press. Like I used to love doing that. I just found that my body and the results I wanted didn't weren't as gained from that, if that makes sense. So the goals that I set for my body weren't as attainable through that form of exercise versus like yoga. And I was really trying to work on strength and mobility in a very what's the word? Like localized area because I suffered a really
Mm.
bad wrist injury where I very badly broke my wrist. And so for me, a lot of it was just like flexibility and just working on moving. Before I started yoga, I could not touch my toes. I couldn't even touch my shins. I would
Wow.
fail the sit and reach in school, guys. So,
I am
you don't,
so impressed by you because I saw you doing a headstand. And
yeah.
that's crazy to think that you have been able to push your body to the limits and really improve in the practice.
Yeah, and it's still an ever you're always a lifelong student of yoga, but yeah, I couldn't even touch my shins. Like if I did a forward fold, I was like lingering towards my shins. I had no back flexibility whatsoever. I would fail the sit and reach in middle school and high school when we had to do the thing, and you'd see like the gymnasts go and like
Yeah.
push beyond the box, and you're just like, how do you do that? But again, over time and just being comfortable with being a student and being comfortable with always learning is really important. And eventually, if you have a goal set, you will get past that. My goal was to never be able to touch my toes. That is just something that came naturally. My goal was stop getting migraines and stop having so much like holding so much stress in my body.
Love that. And I think that it is extremely important with wellness too to acknowledge that there are times in our life where there's going to be some negative influences and that it's okay to be in discomfort sometimes. I feel as if I have struggled in the past finding comfortability with uncomfortability. And
Mm.
so that's something that I always try to improve on myself because I read In the Subtle Art of Not Giving an F.
Oh, that's
So
such a great book. That
I
is
think this
such a
book is
great book.
so great. I highly recommend reading it to anyone. I have flagged so many different quotes, but there was just so many quotes in it where I felt like the author Mark was talking about how sometimes we just need to not care about, getting embarrassed and really pushing ourselves
Yes.
to try new things and be comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yes, that is a huge thing I faced also during my yoga teacher training because a big part of yoga is non-attachment. So not getting attached to things, being comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I am a perfectionist to the core. Like I am
Snaps to
the
that.
epitome of a perfectionist. And yoga training really broke me down from that because I remember the first day we had to get up and practice teach. I went up to teach and I'm not a good public speaker whatsoever. And I just crumbled. I like got up there, my voice was shaky. I started shaking. I kept messing up. We had to just like stop the class that I was teaching because I like just forgot everything. And I immediately after class just like went home and sobbed for
Oh,
hours because I was so disappointed. I'm like, I'm never going to be able to do this. I'm not a good teacher. Like, I'm not cut out for this. And thankfully, I had an amazing cohort that I was a part of. But one of these students was actually a psychologist that was also becoming a teacher. And I called him, and he was like, "This is your perfectionist talking. Like, you have nothing to compare yourself to. This is your first time ever teaching. You have, like, you cannot set this expectation for yourself that you need to be perfect. You need to have self compassion." And I just never thought about that before, as crazy as it sounds. And the very next week, I started getting better and getting better. And I realized like 70% of the way through my training, I eventually stopped scripting my classes when I would go in to practice teach. So I felt like
mm-hmm.
I had like this pose, and this sequence that I was going to do. And I was like, you know what? Today, I'm not using any notes. I'm just going to get up here and throw a sequence together and hope it
Okay.
works.
Yeah, and did
And
it?
that's yes, and that's how I found my teaching style. So now when I'm doing teaching, I actually don't script my classes. I find that what makes me feel most confident and easygoing is to just let it happen and go with what again I'm intuitively feeling that the class needs in that moment. And like I remember the very next class after I had that moment where I'm just like, you know what? Let's just throw it to the wall and see if it sticks. Everyone came up to me after class because they realized like they remembered from like my breakdown in the first class. They're like, you looked so confident and calm. And that was that moment when I realized I don't need to be perfect. I just need to let things happen and if it will organically pan out in the way it's supposed to. So
Thank you so
tips for
much
everyone.
for sharing that. And I think that goes for all walks of life too, because I
Mm-hmm.
find myself in the perfectionist type A, gotta schedule everything as planned. And if it doesn't go as planned, I break down.
Mm-hmm.
And so, even with the podcast, I do have a set of points I want to touch on, but I feel like I sound more scripted when I'm going word for word what I wanted to say. So, just being able to be more spontaneous and more open and organic and authentic, I think is a great, great, great tip for anyone
Yeah.
to do in any walk of life.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, that pulls right into mindfulness. Like do whatever you feel like your heart is calling you to do because and don't compare yourself to other people and their walk and
Mm-hmm.
what they're doing because by nature, like you are doing what your body is what you're thinking to do is what your heart is asking you for. So you need to move forward and tap into that and listen to it and just pursue it. And if it's different from the person next to you, that's completely okay because you guys are different people.
That was extremely poetic.
Thank you. I'll put it on my Instagram later. No,
Put it on your Instagram so I can repost to my
yeah.
story. You already touched on some of your diet tips, such as drinking lemon water in the morning, but diet does play a crucial role in overall wellness. And I am not talking about dieting, like restricting what we eat. I just mean the food we're putting in our body. So I
Mm,
was curious if you have any food tips or other habits that you haven't yet mentioned that have helped you with your nutrition.
yeah, absolutely. So I used to be really, really kind of overly analytical of my nutrition and eating habits. I have a lot of digestive problems. So um,
Hot girls
it's
have
take
stomach problems.
yeah, oh my gosh, tell me about it. I guess I'm a Victoria's Secret model. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah, but yeah, I've had such and I might get emotional during this because I've had such a difficult relationship with food. It has been something that I'm still working on, especially. I've had IBS for as long as I can remember, but I think as of recently, I've learned that I don't have IBS. I actually have an allergy to garlic, and garlic is in
Oh.
everything. So, hence why I've just never been able to get better, even though I've eliminated everything. I am seeing an allergist about it. So, to be continued. But food and I have always had a very difficult relationship because I have always feared food. I've always feared that it would make me sick. And especially when I got really into lifting during pandemic, I was counting calories. I was weighing, I had a little scale in our kitchen, and I was like weighing every dang blueberry that I could pull out. And, again, that is a great thing for some people. I found that it made me just so hyper aware of what I was eating. And I'm like, oh, but if this doesn't fit into my protein intake, then I can't eat it.
Yeah.
And so I stopped counting calories at that point, and I do intuitively eat. But one thing that has been so helpful for me is like an Ayurvedic approach to foods. So for those who don't know Ayurveda, it's like the sister science to yoga, and it's kind of related to your diet and your nutrition and your circadian rhythm. And there are three doshas. So there's Vata, Pitta, and it's lost on me right now. I don't remember what the third one is. Regardless, so basically each dosha has different characteristics. You can kind of even think of it as almost like astrology, how like, for example, a Pisces is like really emotional, for example. So your doshas relate to you as a person. And I took a test on it and found out that I was a Vata, meaning that I run very cold. I always have poor circulation. I'm always wearing socks, which is me. I wear socks everywhere. Um,
I have never heard
you're
of this before, so I'm really intrigued.
yeah. It's like it's not as well known because like it's not it's like a sister science type of thing, and it's not there's not a lot of research to back it up, but it's just one of the practices.
Okay.
So when I did my test and I found out I'm a Vata Pitta, which means I run very cold but can also run very hot as well. A lot of the suggestion to help with your digestion was to pretty much eat only warm foods. Hence why I pretty much only drink tea now. And I always warm up my foods before I eat them. Obviously, certain things like yogurt, I'm not going to warm up. But for the most part, I try and eat warm meals. And I have found it's really helped me with my digestion and really kind of get things moving and help me feel much better. My bloat has gone down so much
Wow.
because the science behind it is that your stomach, your Manipura chakra, your solar plexus, is a chemical reaction. You're breaking things down, you're moving things. There's a lot of just fire and energy going into your digestive system. And when you drink something cold, you're putting kind of like water on it. You're putting
Mm-hmm.
water on a fire and kind of suppressing it and making it harder for your digestion to run. And so when you eat warm things and drink warm liquids, it helps just give a little bolster to your digestion to help it flow a little bit better.
Wow. So for
Yeah.
someone like me that is part werewolf and hot all the time, does that
hmm
mean that I should favor cooler foods or maybe like raw veggies opposed to warmed up veggies? Is that kind of the
Yeah,
science?
so a lot of it would be maybe not like drinking ice cold drinks, but maybe room temperature
Okay.
drinks. When you're making foods, having a lot of like seeds in it to be really nourishing. Other things for, I think you would be a pitta, which if I remember correctly. So that would also be a lot of vegetables,
Makes
very
sense.
cooling things, fruits, all
I
those
love
things kind
fruit.
of help. Yeah, all of that stuff is really helpful. Yeah, definitely look up the Ayurveda doshas, and like if you ever, and to everyone, anyone listening, like take a look and see if it's something that resonates with you. I'm still playing around with it, but it's just something that again I'm like looking into and practicing with and kind of seeing what works, what doesn't. So yeah.
Yeah, and if there's one thing you take away from this episode, I think that it is wellness is not one size fits all.
Mm-mm.
So playing around and just figuring out, we can give you ideas and tips, but it might not work for you. So just keep that in mind when you're testing things out.
Yeah, definitely. And when it comes to your relationship with food, again, be just very mindful of what your triggers are and things that can put you in. And I don't just mean like physically triggered, but like emotionally, mentally
Mm-hmm,
triggered. Things
mm-hmm.
that, if you have maybe like a negative relationship with food or maybe fast food or what have you, you know, work on navigating that in a healthy space, talking to a professional, somebody to maybe help you work around that because in the end, food is supposed to be nourishing. It's supposed to be life giving. And it can't be something that we look negatively at. And that's something I've really had to work with that it's not something that's supposed to make me sick. It's supposed to help me feel energized and happy. So thankfully, we have so much food that we can eat, and there's so many different ways to get around it. So finding what works for you, what works for you may not work for someone else, and then going with that.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I needed to
Yeah,
hear that. And I know a lot of my listeners needed to hear that too. So I appreciate all the tips you are giving us because,
of
as I said in the
course.
beginning of the episode, I'm a little sponge today, soaking in everything that you're saying. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, I wish I could remember what the third dosha was. I don't know why it's like blanking on me right now. It's like Vata, Pitta. Oh, Kapha was the third one. Kapha, which is like earth energy, like very earth.
Um,
So
I'm
there we
very
go. Came
not
through.
earth. I'm a fire sign through and through, like 6 times Sag, Aries
Yeah,
moon. If that
I'd
says
be
anything
interested
about
to
me.
see if you like did the Ayurveda test, if you would be a Pitta, because Pitta is like that fire energy. So,
I feel like physically my body's always like you can see I have so much rosacea, which is something that I've been very insecure about in the past.
hmm
But I think it's just the fire and the warmth runs through my veins. I'm a little sun in the sky, and
it's
I'm just
good.
learning to embrace it.
You give sunshine, you give energy to everybody.
I try my best.
Yeah, so love it.
Speaking of sunshine, you touched on circadian rhythms a little bit, and quality sleep, I feel like, is something that is really overlooked and
Mm,
oftentimes sacrificed in our 20s just because we have so much going on, especially in college. If you're studying or getting your master's, if you have kids in your 20s or 30s, whoever's listening. So, can you talk about maybe some relaxation techniques or yoga tips, or you even touched on looking at the sun when you wake up, things that can help
mm.
improve our sleep.
Yeah, definitely. This is so great. So when it comes to a great, I'll backtrack a little bit. A lot of people, when they have this goal and they come and they're like, I really want to start waking up early. How do you do it? Your mornings begin with your night routine. So going
Ooh.
to bed really early or at a accessible or achievable time, a reasonable time for you is what will help prepare you to wake up naturally earlier in the morning. I'm usually in bed by 10, like sleeping at 10. I am a grandma. I do not like to be up late
Retweet.
at night. I get angry. Like if I
Me too.
if I'm out at like a like maybe at a little party or something with friends, like I'm looking at my husband like we need to go now. Like and he's a night owl through and through. So like I'm
Literally
sitting
same
there like
dynamic between me and
yeah,
Michael. I'm like, it's
yeah.
8 p.m. time for
Yep.
Granny to read her book
Yeah.
in bed.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm like nodding off in the corner trying to like fight for my life to stay awake.
hmm
Yeah, so for me, since I know that about myself, I try my best to go to sleep early, but also I try not to have caffeine too late in the evening or the afternoon. My husband again will drink a coffee at 7 p.m. and still go to bed in an hour. I don't know how he does it.
It could be a
It's
male thing.
ridiculous.
Michael's the same way. Michael doesn't, but Michael also stays up extremely late. So maybe he's not
Yeah,
a good example.
it's just and I don't know how he does it. That's his body. But for me, I don't try and have caffeine even if that's like green tea or English breakfast tea. I won't have that past like noon. So that's a big thing that's been helpful for me is just being mindful when I'm having caffeine. I know people hear this all the time, and I'm also so guilty of this, but just don't use your phone at night. We always heard growing up, don't do your homework where you sleep. Don't go on your phone where you sleep. If you're, laying in bed and you're scrolling on your phone, it's going to keep you awake. The lights, the videos, the flashing, it's just you're activating that part of your brain that wants to be alert. Try your best to turn your phone off. If you can't put your phone in another room, turn it off, or put the volume down and just put it to the side next to you. We are a society of phone addiction through and through, and I'm also very addicted to my phone.
Yeah,
Um,
chronically online.
yes, 100%. So I really try not to use my phone at least an hour before going to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
I really try and just let myself, just the same way as my mornings, decompress and let my body naturally go to bed. I love to read. Reading does make me sleepy, but in a good way.
Mm-hmm.
But also reading can, if I'm really into a book, like it's either I
It's
go
gonna
to bed
keep you up.
early or I'm up till 4. Yeah, like there's no in between.
Yeah.
So be mindful of that. But reading, if I do, like I'll try and like read my Bible late at night because like that's just a lot to process. So I'll like sit in bed or something and I'll try and read that to help me go to sleep. Another thing, actually, I cannot live without my sound machine, like my water sounds and
Oh.
everything. This is a new little part of my life, and I got my husband on it. But I went over my cousin's house a couple months ago, and I was helping them put their baby to sleep, and they had a sound machine, and I was listening to it. I'm like, I want that. Like, I want to hear these like birds chirping or these streams streaming. Like, I wanted to hear this stuff. I'm like, if a baby can use it, why not we? So, we or what is it? We set my Google Home up to at 7 p.m. every night. It starts playing waterfall sounds. And that really
Oh.
helps me. Yeah. Sometimes people use like a fan as white
Michael
noise and
uses a
such.
fan. I use
Yeah.
Disney cartoon movies.
Oh, that's great
I don't
too.
know why.
Yeah.
I
Bluey and
never,
stuff.
yeah, I put it on for 20 minutes only. I put on the sleep timer, and every night, I don't watch it. I put on like a Disney movie or TV show, something that's
Hmm.
not high
Like
action.
brainless a little bit.
Yeah, and I just close my eyes and listen, and I drift off to sleep.
Hmm.
I
Yeah,
don't know
that's
why.
great.
It all
Yeah.
started from me living alone and being scared that I was alone in my apartment and hearing different
Mm,
noises. So if I could focus on that noise and just close my eyes and listen, it just became very calming to me, like a waterfall sound.
yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. Finding something that works for you. If it's waterfall, if it's a fan, that really helps. I don't know the science behind it, so someone let me know. But yeah, being able to listen to kind of like these low brain waves, like meditative frequency kind of stuff helps. Um, the other thing that I try and do before I go to sleep is I do this maybe once a week or twice a week, but a little oil massage on my scalp. So this is also kind of part of Ayurveda because they use a lot of oil. But if you take maybe like you could use coconut oil or you can use avocado oil, which a lot of people have in their house. Put a little bit of avocado oil on your palms and like rub them together so it's nice and warm. And then just like do a little tiny scalp massage before you go to sleep. Obviously, if you have naturally very oily hair, don't do this every night, maybe like once or
Me.
twice a week. Yeah, yeah, because you don't want to like put too much oil in your hair. But it's really good for just kind of like giving yourself a little relaxation and we also deserve it. Like we deserve little head massages. So doing
Yeah.
that helps as well.
No, those are great tips. I'm going to utilize those, and hopefully all the listeners will utilize those too. I do have greasy hair, but I think, do you still think it would be the same if I just massage my head without the oils? You think I'd still get the
Yeah, you
benefits?
could. Yeah, oh yeah, you definitely can. And I know that apparently this is what we're told, but I can't attest to it because I don't really have very oily hair. I have curly hair, which is very
Mm,
dry. But apparently if you do the oiling on the scalp, once or twice a week, it doesn't actually increase any more oil production in your hair. I can't speak on behalf of that because I don't know, but we were taught that it doesn't,
hmm.
because you're still naturally producing sebum. So, but I don't know.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's good to know.
And if anything, put it on your roots and, put
Oh,
a little
that's
on your roots
fair.
to help with the hair. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I've used rosemary oil to help
Mm,
increase.
blood
I don't
flow and
know what it
everything.
does. I don't know what
Yeah.
it does, but it's helped my hair grow. So
Yeah.
I'm going to
Blood
stick
flow and
with it.
everything. Love that. Yes.
Switching gears here, how do you maintain healthy relationships and self care at the same time. I know that's something I've struggled with, things like setting boundaries and
Mm.
prioritizing activities that make me happy. But do you have any tips for the listeners on how you do it?
Yeah, I think, and by relationships, you mean like with other people
Just,
or
yeah,
like with,
just
yeah.
relationships with other people, family, friends, partners.
Yeah, so I used to be that person, and this was especially prevalent like right out of COVID, where I was like, I don't want to see anybody. I didn't
Same.
want to go out and talk to
Yeah.
anyone. I like if you told me back then I'd be sitting down doing like a podcast episode, I'd be like, no, I'm not. Like, absolutely no way. But I was somebody who did not want to go out. I was very introverted, and there's nothing wrong with that. But at the same time, I started losing a lot of connection with people, and it's also important to have connection. So for me, a lot of my friends know that I'm very invested and do a lot of self care and mindfulness. And knowing that I'm still somebody who I go out more now and I talk with friends and I love all of the time that I have with others, but also I care a lot about my me time and making sure first thing in the morning that I'm spending time with myself and relaxing, being able to communicate that boundary to friends. And I think if they are a true friend or there's a prominent partner in your life, they will be supportive of it. It's gotten to the point where before I would force myself to go out to people just to feel like I needed to go out with them and it was an obligation. And that's not fair to your friend. It's not fair to whoever you're seeing to just go out and be with them because you feel like you should, because then you're not completely giving them your time and attention and they're not receiving your 100% time and attention. A better alternative is saying, you know what, I really don't feel like going out tonight. I really don't maybe feel like having this phone call tonight or going on this trip. I'm going to spend a little bit of time with me because I really need that right now. And when I'm feeling up for it, and, as long as you're open, let's reschedule for a time that really works for us both so I can be fully there and invested in you. And if somebody really does value your friendship and that relationship, they will be understanding of that. That doesn't mean, cancel every plan that you always have.
Yes.
You do have to give a little bit. And by that, I mean, you do also have to reach out as well. It's not a one-way street. You also need to every now and then kind of push yourself to get out there. But recognizing and prioritizing when the appropriate time is to devote that time to yourself and when is it okay to maybe step back and say, you know what, yeah, I've been really in my shell lately. I think now it's time to like just put myself out there a little bit.
I appreciate you sharing that. And you talked about just being mindful of when you are in the right headspace or when you might not be in the
Mm-hmm.
right headspace. And I feel as if we face many common challenges as 20 somethings. And so I'm curious if you have any tips on how to overcome some of these challenges that we might be facing with wellness.
Yeah, I think the first one that comes to my mind is I don't have time. And there are a lot of people, like parents out there, people that genuinely are crunched for time. And I think it kind of touches back to what we were talking about before, but reframing what our perspective of wellness is can help us find the time, even if it is just a couple minutes, to take that moment for ourselves. For example, breathing exercise. If you have a ton of three kids running around, the house is a mess, like you have to clean, you've got to cook, you've got this, you've got that, you've got to bring Johnny to soccer practice in an hour. Um, you know, you're sitting in the soccer practice parking lot, you just dropped your son off, take 3 minutes to do box breathing. Take just a couple seconds to maybe get out of your car, stretch a little bit, get your body moving. It's a really easy way to incorporate it. I know it's so hard and it feels like, I've got so much going on. How am I just going to drop a 10-minute yoga practice in? If it's something that you want to value and incorporate into your life, you will naturally find the time for it. Like I said, if that comes down to waking up 20 minutes earlier and going to bed
Mhm.
20 minutes earlier to do so, you have to do it. And I think a lot of people kind of, unfortunately, just want to take things at face value and say, I don't have the time. I don't have the time. But I think a lot of it also has to do with, do you want to find the time to do it? And it's okay if you don't want to. That's okay. But just know that it doesn't have to be time consuming to do it. It just has to be time allotting, if that makes sense.
It makes so much sense. And I agree. I think we use a lot of different excuses when it comes to wellness. Another one being the financial aspect, which we
Mhm.
touched on previously. If you can't afford the Pilates or yoga studio, you do have different avenues to do it at home
Yeah.
or go out for a walk in the woods. So I appreciate you bringing that back around too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the financial part is huge and totally, totally makes sense. I think one of my favorite things I'm seeing right now, especially in the yoga space, is chair yoga for individuals
Oh.
that maybe don't have leg ability, or leg mobility, I should say,
Mhm.
and they are in wheelchairs. They now have chair yoga that's becoming kind of like popular online, and I love it. It makes me so happy because it's bringing this practice to making it more accessible for people and showing, yoga doesn't have to be doing a headstand. Yoga is really, sitting down, meeting yourself where you're at, and maybe just doing a couple arm stretches, maybe in the morning, twirling your wrists around. So it's
Definitely.
great.
Is there any other wellness or lifestyle topics that you wanted to touch on today that we may not have had a chance to talk about?
I think actually there is one maybe that I could pop in, but, and this can tie into the mindfulness category, I should say, but finding a hobby that really you're really passionate about. And, a lot of us have full-time jobs. A lot of us are
Hmm.
parents and we're working around the clock, or we're wedding planning and this and that. But finding a hobby that you can just really pour into, I think is so important. For me this year, my hobby has been watercolor painting. I do not know how to paint. I am not
You are
artistic.
the queen of unique hobbies because I also started knitting and I
Yes,
just
I
felt
do knit
so
too.
inspired by your knitting.
Oh,
I
thank
want to
you.
start doing something that produces something, if that makes
Serotonin.
sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Just, I
Yeah.
think
No.
it's so cool learning skills because a lot of
Mm,
my hobbies are digital and sometimes I
mm,
want to disconnect from the digital. Even this podcast is digital. So I'm trying to find more hobbies like knitting, reading, watercolors. Painting is so healing.
yes. Yeah, totally. I think it's so important. I do knit as well. And that's another thing I've started. I kind of started knitting and watercolor painting. And again, I cannot paint whatsoever, but it's just fun to
It's
like
just fun.
pour water on
Yeah.
it. And yeah, and be playful like a kid and to like tap into your creativity. And maybe it is reading, maybe it's candle making. I don't know. Maybe it's building Legos. Like it's okay to just be a kid and be playful and just find something, because that can also be a really great mindfulness practice and just helping you kind of zone out the world and focus on something that maybe doesn't to the outside world seem like it adds value, but it adds value to you because it makes you happy. So
I agree. I think anything you can pour love into, you don't have to be good at it to enjoy it. And I'm not good at a lot of stuff, and that's okay because if it makes me smile, if it makes me feel full, then that's all that matters.
yes,
But
100%.
before we close off today, the one question I ask everyone that joins us on the podcast is what is your one piece of advice you'd like to share with all 20 somethings? This can be anything, stuff you've learned so far in your 20s, just something you want to shout out to our 20 somethings, whatever you want to share. I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, I would say my biggest piece of advice, and I won't take credit for this because it's just something I've heard recently, but it's really resonated with me, is ask questions and be curious. Ask questions because the answer is in the room and you're most likely not the one to have the answer. So always be willing to learn from other people, ask questions and be curious. That's how we grow, that's how we learn. And it's so important to be able to just wonder about the world and let yourself learn new things, because how are we going to hear about watercolor painting if we don't ask someone what their hobbies they're doing are? So go ahead and be curious. Don't be afraid to ask questions, because and it's okay, like as we talked about before, it's okay to quote unquote look silly, because you don't look silly, you're just learning something
So incredibly insightful. So thank you for sharing your advice. Thank you, Eve, so
new.
much for joining us today. Your expertise and valuable tips are going to help me on my wellness journey. And I think it's going to help all the young adults listening in too. So thank you
Thank
for
you.
joining. Thank you to all the listeners as well for tuning in to the 20 something survival guide. Remember to prioritize your well being as you navigate through life's adventures because we all know life can get a little crazy. I did want to say as well, if you liked the episode today, I'd really appreciate you taking the time to screenshot it, share it on your social, taking the time, check out Eve's Instagram as well, and hitting the subscribe button or even rating the podcast to help us grow. Please consider following both me and Eve on Instagram, which I will link in the show notes. I love you all. I'm Darren Alexis, and don't forget to survive and thrive.
Bye.